Thank you all for being here today. And under the circumstances, I would be remiss if I did not thank you all for your support over the last week. It's been strenuous here at the school. I know not just for us in the schools, but for you as family members and parents. And so we are very appreciative of that, and hopefully you've been able to get some of our communications as well. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that security impacts this facility study, and we'll highlight a couple things from that. But I do appreciate many of you in the support that you've shown as we try to get through this. And I will tell you that we're not alone. We do have school districts all over not only our county and our state, but all over our country that are dealing with this issue right now. So we're very appreciative of our families and communities for that support. I want to start today by giving you a little bit of an overview of the study. Today's going to be informational, but it will also be slightly interactive. So there'll be opportunities for you to ask questions. There'll be opportunities for you to see some of the things that are a part of the study, get close-hand looks at some of the particular buildings that you might be most interested in. You might have a son or daughter, or grandson or daughter that goes to a particular building, and you want to take a look at that. So each of the building administrators are going to be here to be able to present on that and share some insights into those specific buildings. So we'll have some time to do that. The way that it will look is I'm going to give a brief overview of the study. I'm going to talk a little bit about why the study was conducted and what we did. We're going to talk about the needs for our facilities and some of the things that the study has taught us about all sorts of different things. It's a myriad of pages, lots of pages of information that we'll be condensing for you, and we won't read every page to you. We will have building station time where you'll have a chance to be able to see all of the different stations and buildings that will be represented by their administrators. We'll talk a little bit about financial considerations, and we will have a time for you to ask questions and hopefully be able to provide you with some answers and information. So as we get into this, I want you to understand that this was a comprehensive facility study. It was performed by NJB Architects. Lisa's here up in the front, so she'll be here as well for as people walk around. But this being comprehensive, what that really meant in terms of this study is that every square inch of the district was looked at. So in this binder, which is hundreds of pages long, I could literally open up to Cyrene Elementary School and I could find out the conditions of the ceiling tiles in room 95, okay? Specifically which ones need to be replaced. That's the level of detail that the facility study unearths. On top of that, we asked NJB, who does this for other school districts, this is part of what they do and they conduct this study, that they actually look at cost considerations, right? What would some of these things cost? Where do we need to make adjustments? And so I'm going to get into a couple of those things and some of their cost considerations as well. We asked them to be very frugal and conservative. This was not something where we said, what would happen if we just built all new buildings? Because that's not even in reality anything that we can afford or that we're asking to do. We also said, we don't have a lot of extra money to be spending on these things, so please be conservative and reasonable and frugal in what you're looking at. So they might say, well, it would be great if you just redid this entire wing of this building, but that's not a reality for us. So what types of things can we do with the limited resources that we do have? A lot of the recommendations surrounded code requirements. So for example, our buildings in many cases were built 30, 40, 50 years ago. In those situations, the code at the time, they were compliant, now we might not be. So we had some considerations to take a look at, which I'll speak to as it pertains to codes. And then they also looked at some potential improvements. In 2018, what does a typical school district of our size, capacity, and offerings, what do we typically offer? And think about how we could, again, frugally and for the best bang for our buck, move down that road of trying to make some of those improvements. So we asked NJB to look at this from three lenses, and today we still look at this through three lenses. The first one is, what do we have to have by law? So for example, if I don't have a building that has ADA accessibility, the Americans for Disability Act accessibility, that's something that the law is going to say you need to get that fixed. That has to be upgraded. It may not have been a code 25 years ago, it's a big deal now, right? If you have a classroom on the second floor and we have a student that has a wheelchair, we can't just say, sorry, our buildings are old. We have to actually do something about that. So there are certain things that need to be addressed that are legal things that by law must meet code. Now, I will say before anything gets taken out of context, there is a grandfathering for certain codes. Okay, so because our facilities were built when they were compliant at the time, but they might not be now, but some of those things are okay. Some of them are not, and that's kind of what we're going to get into. But basically, the first lens that we look at is what do we absolutely have to have? What are the requirements and recommendations from the study? The second lens was what do we have to have for efficiency and safety? So I know that that's become obviously a bigger concern on the minds of many people. So efficiency would be the lens of, okay, what do we need to do in terms of cost-saving measures? What do we need to do in terms of being most efficient with our operation? And then, of course, safety is what can we do to improve the security, safety of our buildings themselves? Okay, so that's kind of the second level. So what do we absolutely have to have? And then closely behind that, what do we need to have to make sure we're as efficient and safe as we can possibly be? And the third lens and the final lens is a little bit of a different ask, and that is, okay, what if we need to bring ourselves to a competitive level with other similarly sized school districts? What would that look like? Because there are some things that we're leading on and we're advanced compared to other schools, and there's some things that we aren't. And so we wanted to find out what would be those things that could bring us to a competitive level. So kind of three levels. It's, if you will, the absolute must-haves, your needs, and then your kind of second-tier needs, or things that you might want to have if you could. And so they were not extravagant in the study. I think everything in there was fairly reasonable. So let's talk about that first lens. What must we have by law? And I'm going to make some generalizations here. Each building that you travel to, you'll be able to see some more comprehensive information about each particular school. But the first lens is, what do we need to have by law? One of those big ones, as I've already mentioned, is ADA compliance. Okay? So this includes things that you might not even typically think of, such as bathrooms, okay? And having stalls that are certain widths apart to be able to have a student that would be wheelchair bound have access to that, or a staff member for that matter. It also includes ADA compliant ramps and things like that to different levels in the schools. And most of our schools are on one story, so that's not a problem, other than maybe at the high school. Fire code. We found throughout the study that we have some areas that are not up to the most current fire code. And so we need to look at things such as, how do we put our backpacks and things at an elementary school? Are there flammable materials that are in spaces that they can't be in? Do the doors, especially if they're older doors, do they have the proper fire glazing installed on them? Those are types of things that school districts have to be aware of and they have to have. And of course, building codes change. So I talk about, there are building codes that are, even 5 years old now, that, some of those things need to be adjusted and impacted. And not all things, but at each individual building, some of your presenters, some of the principals of those buildings might be talking about, well, we had a little bit of an issue with this area, we're not to code and we need to address that. And those are things that are the must-haves, okay? So the other lens that we looked at was efficiency and safety. So we also consider this to be a need, and it's a high priority, okay? And so we put a few things into this side, and I think that some of you, and especially in light of what's happened the last week, will be interested to kind of hear some of the recommendations and things that they talked about in the study. Number one is site work. Okay, this might not be something that you typically think about when you talk about safety, but it absolutely is. If you think about this building, for example, okay, and for those of you that have been had a middle school student and you have to drop off in the morning, it's a bit of a nightmare. And so when you talk about how we get into the parking lot, how we get out of the parking lot, if you have a student that's at Cyrene, for example, Very difficult if you're driving your child to school, because where do you drop off? Where do you park? Where do you put that? So in the high school, how do we create the most safe and secure parking lot that only allows the people we want to be there coming in, driving in, right? So parking lots, traffic patterns, inflows, outflows, every elementary school, virtually every elementary school has this problem. The middle school has this problem, and the high school has this problem. And it's because, and there's a variety of reasons. Number one, our facilities were built a while ago. Okay, long ago, the buildings would be full of school buses. School buses came and they picked up all the kids and they brought them to school. The percentage of students that are transported via bus in today's schooling in 2018 is far less than it used to be. So now we have to create these places where we're intermingling and mixing bus traffic and parent drop-off traffic, much different than what we used to have to contend with. So that's something that the study really called out, was some improvements to the ways you get into the buildings, the ways you get out of the buildings, and the general site work, if that makes sense. In terms of efficiency, a lot of our lights, they're either T11 bulbs or they're bulbs that are fluorescent. In some cases we have some incandescents that are just very, very energy inefficient. And so when we think about saving on energy costs, and for those of you that are here for the first part of this conversation when we talked about Mary Crapo, just simply the savings alone in operating costs moving to the new facility will be substantial. We'll realize that very quickly. And so across the district, not just one building, if we start talking about improving our energy efficiency, that's going to be something where we can really be smart with our dollars. And we've already started doing this through some innovative programs with Consumers Energy. And we have some neat pilot programs going on with that. Efficient doors and windows. This is where we lose a lot of energy as well. And so the study talked a lot about how you could gain lots and lots of savings by simply replacing some of those single pane glass windows and things like that, and doors that are much more energy efficient. The study also recommended at every building, and you're going to see this in in every plan, would be a secure double entry. And what that means is, and if you think about security, okay, these are things that schools didn't think about a long time ago. But if you think about a secure double entry, what that really means is you walk into a space, all right, and then you actually have to be confronted by another human being. And before you gain access to the greater building where students are located, you would actually have to be buzzed into that space. So there's multiple checkpoints. In schools and in institutions where they've had, security issues, when they've had these double entries, they've actually completely locked them down. And they can create a situation where if there's somebody who is a threat to student safety, they would be able to contain that person until police arrive. So we think that's a very important part of this facility study, and one of the things that we're looking at, how could we possibly make some of these things happen? If you look at all of the buildings, you'll see at all of the main entrances, there's a secure double entry there. Technology. The study recommended things like cameras, locking systems, digital security measures, and I'll talk about this on the next slide a little bit more. Some of these are pictures that are kind of hard to see. This right here is an example of one of many different types of models of, they're essentially mechanisms that you slide that right into this boot, if you will, that's inside, drilled into the concrete, and the door is unable to be opened. It's completely locked. You can't, it's not like you could break the door handle and pull the door open. The door is physically unable to be opened. So door hardware. Another thing on door hardware, in the study we've talked about in our buildings, a lot of our doors, they have traditional key locking mechanisms. In schools where they are looking at security and the state-of-the-art security measures, they're looking at door hardware that at the push of a button, every single door in that building could be locked immediately. So they're digital doors. They have the ability to, exactly who's coming in, who's not coming in. So that's something that the study unearthed as well. And I think I already had talked about technology with cameras, software to be able to ID, people who would be there, and also to monitor doors and entryways. So the third lens we looked at was, what would we like to see to be competitive with other school districts? Okay, and this is where I think more debate comes in. Usually on those first two things, people tend to be pretty united and excited about that. But when we get into the being competitive with others, we want to talk about technology. Swartz Creek has been very, very proactive in leading the way in a lot of ways in this area on technology. But what we would like to be able to do is move to that upper echelon of schools that has the ability to say our students in every single class have access to a computer, every single student. And that would be considered a one-to-one initiative. It's not the one-to-one initiative where students are taking hardware home. It's one-to-one in the sense that every classroom that they go in, they each have access to a computer. It's not like they have to go to a special lab to have access to a computer. They all have access anytime throughout the day that they'd be in instructional periods. Our athletic facilities. Our athletic facilities lag behind in several areas. And this is an area that quite frankly, we could see a benefit to improving. For one, if you've ever been to one of our home football games, the home side is on the wrong side and you stare into the sun the whole first part of the game. So if you didn't know that might be something you pick up this fall. But our athletic facilities, not only to upgrade those, but to improve the playing surface to a point where there's a much less upkeep, and the payoff over time is actually pretty quick. When you start looking at how much we pay to upkeep our fields and things like that. And we do the best we can, and we're very grateful for the facilities we do have, but I think that this is an area where we could see some enhancement, and you will see some of those recommendations in the study themselves. And temperature-controlled facilities. It's very difficult for students. I know my grandfather fought in World War II, and he just yells and gripes about this stuff all the time. He's like, I can't believe you actually need air conditioning. Kids are a little different nowadays, and it's a little bit different for a student now in school to focus when it's 90 degrees outside in June. That's all debatable, right? I mean, everybody can say they need to toughen up and everything else, but they're pretty tough. If you walk into our buildings that aren't temperature controlled, you'll find them to be pretty tough in June and August. But that's something that would help to bring our facilities also into a place where we're more competitive with other facilities. And I think that when you start thinking about student comfort and how they learn, that is a factor. So those are the three kind of big lenses we looked at. Again, what do we absolutely have to have by law? What would we like to have? What are the things that would help us be more efficient and safe as a school? And then what are the things that would keep us competitive with some other school districts? And so you're going to see those themes throughout as you go and see some of the different boards. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to give you about 15-20 minutes of time. Mr. Claren has graciously brought us some snacks, and there's coffee. And each building administrator will be at the stations. So can you go to your, right now, building administrator, so we can kind of highlight where you're at? All right. So Mr. Kitchen is here at the high school. He's actually going to move over here. Who do we have here? Mr. Claren is at the, I think he's here, isn't he? Okay, I've seen him somewhere. Mr. Claren will be here, and Mr. Morgan will be there as well for the middle school. Who do we have back here? Is that Gaines?
Yeah, no, this is
Gaines?
This is admin.
Okay, that's the admin building. Ms. Mansour will be there. Gaines, Morrish, Elms, Deek, and Cyrene. So you'll be able to talk with the administrators at each of those buildings, and then we'll give a warning in about 20 minutes or so, and we'll come back to finish up and provide time for questions. Okay? Thank you. Okay. I'd like to move into some financial considerations, because as you look at the boards, obviously people say that sounds great, looks wonderful, and they do. And we have certain things that we have already started implementing from the study. I'll give you an example. We just approved a purchase to upgrade our security cameras at the middle school. The middle school security cameras have been spotty and intermittent. They work, but not to the level that we want them to, so we have just approved an expenditure for that. And so that's part of what was in the study as a recommendation to upgrade and improve. So we're already starting to say, where do we have some dollars that we can start to put towards things that are in the study? But I want to put some perspective around this, and so that everybody understands, we are extremely transparent with our finances. This is not something that we try to hide. We're very open, and we approve our budgets in public. We have great accountability at the board level. Mr. Ahern, as our treasurer, does a great job of kind of constantly looking through those books. Stacy Pescuzzo at our business office now is really taken us to a new level in terms of accountability and transparency. So we're very proud of that. But I am also going to talk to you transparently about what the real costs of these types of things are. So our budget is $39 million a year, to put that into perspective. About 80% of that is spent on how we support our teachers, our aides, our secretaries, our bus drivers, our administrators. That's essentially in a nonprofit organization right on track with how much money it costs to essentially run your instructional programs. Now, that 80% of that budget does not include, all of the money that we have to spend on curricular materials, on heating and cooling a building, on food service, on transportation costs. And so you'll see that that number fills up really quickly. So schools have a very limited amount of money to put towards some of these facilities and financial considerations. So to give you an idea of what the study has said in a few different areas, the site work would cost the district about $7.8 million, okay, closer to $7.9 million, okay? So that's for the whole district. Now I do want you to understand that these numbers that I'm sharing with you, they represent every single thing that you saw in this room, okay? So I know that in the past we've talked about, well, we're going to spend all the money on one building, or we're going to spend all the money in this area. This study was intentional in that we were asking for the study to highlight what it would cost across the whole district. Now, this is something that we cannot afford to do in our operating budget. It's an impossibility. But we are going to still move forward and start chipping away at little by little things that we can afford. And we're, like I gave you the examples with the security cameras, we're going to start implementing what we can from the study. But that's for the entire district. That's not just one school. Code upgrades is about $4.3 million, and those are just for fire, security, ADA, those types of building code upgrades and the things that we're looking at. Renovations are about $23 million, okay? And that comes from the rising cost of wages and labor and facility costs. Schools are much different to build than houses. They're made of brick and stone, and they have commercial codes and much different requirements to build than a typical residential home. Additions are $13 million, $13.1 million. These several things, some of them blend together a little bit. It's difficult to say just one area, but that gives you a general idea on the total cost of this facility study. Now, to put that into perspective, if we were to just say, look, our high school is kind of in need of some work. We need to replace the high school. What would it cost to replace the high school? You're looking between $90 and $100 million to replace a building like the high school, okay? So this was true to its form, and they were very conservative and they were very frugal in saying we want to touch every building in the district. And so these are the overall bottom line costs. To give you an idea of what types of monies we have to put towards some of these projects, right? Each year the Building and Site Fund has about between $300,000 and $400,000 to spend towards these types of projects, okay? Now, most of us, and I wasn't a math teacher, but we know that that's not a ton of extra money to put towards that, okay? The price tag that we were looking at. Our general fund maintenance budget is about $200,000. That's what we have to spend on like basic upgrades. A faucet breaks, we've got to fix and replace a new faucet, or a toilet, or things like that. We have about $200,000 in that account. One of the things in this community that has been I would say contentious in the past. Now, I wasn't here for it, but I certainly am here for it now, and I've heard about it, okay? And I've gotten my history lesson. And so the reality is I understand the concern that people had about the cage and the PAC. Let me just give an outsider's perspective for a second. If you didn't have the cage, you would not have a place for your kids to practice unless they were practicing at 10 o'clock at night. And so as contentious as that was, how it happened, I can't speak to that. All I know is that I've worked with our board, and they felt at the time that it was the right decision to make. And I can say that now that it is ours, it's a great benefit to our students. Our kids don't have to practice till 10 o'clock every night because they actually can get onto a court and do those types of things. There's a small amount of revenue that comes in that we're really going to start to capitalize, but to give you an idea, our annual payment on the cage is $180,000, okay? And so that's something that we have as a liability that we have to pay for. Now, that payment is ending, Stacy, in 4 years, okay? So that as soon as that's done, I think if you're thinking about from a budget perspective, that'll be great because we'll have this money that we can start applying to some of these we can add that to some of these budgets, okay? Part of our PAC annual payment is $1.1 million, okay? Now, this is done in 8 years, okay? But you're talking about a facility that cost over $15 million to build, and it is state-of-the-art. And if you talk about a place to send your children for the arts and music, we have pretty much the premier facility in Genesee County. So we're proud of that. It's something that we should be proud of. But nonetheless, this is something that in 8 years we'll have some more money that we can start to put towards that. But one of the things that has recently come out, and I am not making a political statement here, I'm trying to educate on what's happened. In President Obama's last few years in office, one of his measures to balance his budget was to go back on some of the promises that were made when we initially took out the loan for the PAC. We had a 0% interest loan, and it was 0% because the interest was going to be paid by the federal government. He came back on that his final 2 years and basically said, we're not going to be able to really do that like we promised. So the result of that is that the school district was then having to come up with what the government was paying in terms of interest portion, and that eats into this $300,000 to $400,000 that we have. Okay. The worst part from that perspective is that it got worse, and with the new administration, we're being told that that is actually going away. So I am in no way, shape, or form making a political statement. I'm telling you about the facts of what the government is doing in terms of that federal subsidy that we were getting for that property. So I'm giving you all of that financial information because there's nothing for us to hide. This is the reality. These things cost money, and we are going to do our best to try and use the monies that we do have to start chipping away at it. Okay? But obviously, in terms of long term, it's going to take us a long time to chip away at some of these things. There are things that we've placed on high priority, such as the security cameras that we just approved, and we're going to continue wherever we have a little extra money to support some of those things for security and safety measures, which is a top priority for us at this time. So I've given you kind of an overview of the study. I've given you an opportunity to kind of talk to each building and see a little bit about what each building has in store. Again, the facility study was fairly conservative, but I want to, that helps hopefully you understand the financial picture and what our finances are. And if you ever want to see that, it's all posted online. We don't spend money without the public knowing, but it's one of those things that you can be more informed on if you'd like to be. We'd be happy to talk about that. But I'd be interested to know if there's anybody that has any questions or comments about the study itself, anything else that hopefully we can provide some perspective on. So we'll go here. Yeah.
The code enforcement that has to be done, and which one of those does that come out of? Which fund does that come out of?
In terms of the costs,
Right.
sorry, I went back too far. I believe it was $4.3 million. Here we go. $4.3 million.
Now, where does that come from?
Well, in terms of where it comes from, we're having to come up with that money. So we don't have this money in our budget, right? So it's like, okay, when we get a little extra money, we need to try and do something. We have a bathroom that's falling apart. For example, we just had Deke Elementary, this is a practical example. The bathroom doors in that area needed to be replaced. So when we replaced it, we replaced them with currently up to code ADA compliant stalls. Does that make sense?
Well, other than Mary Crapo, which is, there are none that are gonna, if you don't do it, you're gonna get kicked out or shut down.
In terms of being kicked out or shut down, no, we haven't had that. We have not had that. There's no doomsdayer out there. But there are things that are not up to code, I guess is what I would say. So, great question. Yes, sir?
Is the facility study online?
Is the facility study online? It is not online, but we should put it online. We have to figure out how to scan all that in. So, do you have a digital document?
I'm trying to think. I think in sections.
Okay, so we do have a copy that is always available at the board office if anyone were to want to take a look. But for our purposes, we would love to get a digital copy. It's just a matter of putting the pieces together. So we'll work on that. So could you get back with me on that?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yes?
Have you been able to estimate what is a reasonable request for residential tax increase so that we can get it, put a dent in some of this? Because I think we need this.
Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is yes. I have looked at that. So anyway, we are not at a point where we're making any statements about that, but I can tell you that if you're looking at a total package of about $48 million, okay, and I'm going to just be very clear. I am not saying that that's what we're asking for. I'm just telling you we've run the numbers, okay? Genesee County has 22 school districts. We are currently the only district in Genesee County that is unbonded in terms of a debt levy. Okay, so we are the only one of the 22. So in the past, our community has said no to us. We went out and we asked for an $88 million bond for a new high school. Probably was a little bit of an overreach. I'm not trying to place blame on anyone. I'm just letting everybody know that being fully transparent here. We then came back 6 years later with a $72 million ask, okay? Now, we haven't been to our community in a while, okay? But the purpose for this facility study was to find out, we gotta do some stuff now. What can we do on a shoestring budget here, okay? The total cost of $48 million is literally half of what we've asked our community for in the past. So, in terms of the ask, we think that that would be a reasonable ask. We're not asking, we're just having conversations, but this facility study certainly informs, the board's direction and what they're going to do in terms of deciding whether or not they're going to ask the community for that. The average house in Swartz Creek is about $140,000. The average increase in taxes for that ask would be about $250 a year.
A year.
A year.
I think that's reasonable. Spread out over a year, divided by 12. I really think you should go back to the board and ask again because circumstances have changed, we've evolved, and we have to evolve with the time.
Mm-hmm.
I need to sleep at night,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so, and this
Yeah.
helps me. A couple of dollars extra will make a difference in my sleep pattern.
Well, I appreciate that feedback, and I'm sure the board is listening and hearing that, and we're having those conversations. As you know, there's a history, and we're not shying away from that. We're not trying to deny it, but we do want to try and bring this information to light. These are real numbers, and these are real potential projects. And we're gonna move forward whether we decide as a board to ask for the money or not. We're gonna try and do everything in our power to take the money that we do have and chip away at these things. But in order to do wholesale what these things are looking at, it's gonna cost around $48 million. And that money, again, is half of what we asked for just one building. And this project touches every square inch of the school district. So we feel like that's meager, we feel like it's responsible, but we're not at a point yet where we're ready to ask, but when we do, I'll make sure I come and talk to you. Okay? All right. Yes?
In the past, when, the board has come to us for millages and
Mhm.
such, I just felt it wasn't really put into context for people, how the improvement that it would make in their houses will be worth more.
Yeah.
And the increase in your taxes, my husband was playing with some figures, he goes, essentially came down to a family of 4 not going to Applebee's one day a month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Put it in that kind of perspective,
Yep.
it's like, and then your housing's gonna go up, it only makes the community better.
Yeah, so there's definitely an argument to be made. The research on school districts that have a bond and then their school district obviously increases in value, your home values obviously go up in turn. And what you'll see is that in Swartz Creek, the home values have remained somewhat static, whereas in places like a Fenton or a Flushing, when they pass a millage, the home values rise accordingly. So it absolutely would impact people's bottom line in terms of their wealth and in terms of the ownership of their homes. That's a good point. Yes, sir?
Question, is any of these figures could be supplemented by any type of future grants?
Absolutely. Anytime we have an opportunity to look at new grant revenue streams, the ones that are going to be most realistic are probably those for security. We started looking at those already. Wherever we can, find the dollars that could help us with some of these things. I'll give another example would be the state of Michigan has offered some grants for air-conditioned buildings and things like that. They're not going to pay for the whole project, but it puts a dent in it. And so we're always looking for those revenue streams and opportunities, for sure. Good question. Yes.
So, the security, I'm gonna call it roundabout, which I know it's the wrong thing, but for the children, the students to come in, is that gonna be done soon, or is that something you guys are still trying to find funds for?
Okay, so give me a little bit more information.
Repeat the question.
Okay, so,
Can you repeat the question? I can't hear.
yeah, so the question was, are you talking about the double entries?
Yeah, so this, basically for the safety.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question was, are the double entries something that we're gonna do now, or is it something that we're waiting to find the funds for?
Okay.
The answer is going to be, we're gonna try and do everything we can now, but the reality of our situation is I'm not sure we're gonna be able to afford to do everything we need to now. We have changed our processes, okay? For those of you that see my emails, I put out an email on student safety. Just to recap that, we have started a new protocol for training an active shooter. It's called ALICE training. Every school is being trained in that. It's a very, very different way of approaching active shooters than what we have seen in the past, okay? So we are stepping out and kind of ahead of the curve on that. Our entries now, on every single one of them, just this past year, we secured the high school front entrance, so every entrance has to be buzzed in. What we've started to do now is we have personnel kind of patrolling that area so that people don't have an unobstructed way to kind of walk about. So that's something that we're trying to work on. We're gonna have some conversations about reorganization of staff at the middle school to do that. But those are some immediate steps that we're taking. If we could afford to do one of those, it would probably be like one a year we're gonna try and do. Our reality is that we feel like that's important to do in all the buildings, but it's a difficult question. We'll do as much as we can right now. Yes?
Do we think, are we gonna start drills, and do we think that drills will, offer comfort to the parents who feel the need to have immediate gratification, since we don't have any money?
The drills? Yes, we are doing drills. Our staff participating in this 2-day training, they're gonna have ongoing training that goes on. The kids are gonna be involved in this eventually and talking through kind of what this looks like. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an important step. I think all of these things that we're doing kind of contribute to overall student safety, and that's what we're trying to.
Does that take money to start the drill process?
Yeah, but we're invested in that money, so we're spending that money already. So, go here and then here. Yes, sir.
As far as these security cameras,
Yep.
the fees, does law enforcement have the ability to access those fees directly?
That's a great question. No, they don't access it directly. However, any case that would get prosecuted, okay, so the way that the law reads is, I'm sorry, the question was, does the security cameras, okay, currently have law enforcement be able to access that directly? No, they cannot access it directly, but the law is, if we have we are not, we are educators, right? Now, we've been forced to be police officers more than we like to be, okay? And so the reality is, we do have some basic protocols that we do in terms of investigating a situation. And so our administrators have all been trained on how to do that. Our administrators know how to do that, but they're not law enforcement officers. There's a totally different threshold of responsibility and, I guess, severity when they get involved, right? So we are required to do our own investigation because we have a different burden of proof under the law, all right? Law enforcement has to do their own investigation. However, in cases where you have a criminal activity, or you have criminal activity, those videos can be released to law enforcement, provided that there's an appropriate subpoena for that. Okay? So sorry I gave you like a crash course on that whole thing. Hope that helps. Okay? And then we're coming here next. Yep.
I just have a couple of thoughts, but one of the things that just came into my head was, you see all the time that athletics, they are soliciting sponsors that will put their flags up with their advertising a large business card or whatnot. Have we ever considered trying to solicit sponsors for some of these projects? And maybe like, you know how the Veterans Memorial sold bricks. Well, you sell a sponsorship to help secure a certain building, or it's the community and the businesses that are in the community investing back into the schools. It's not necessarily gonna fall on all of us, but it's something.
Sure.
And it can be something as small as a little business in town, a bakery, or I work for Chase Bank. Probably would we invest in our community for something like that,
Sure.
or Meyer, or whatever, General Motors. The other thing, did they talk about metal detectors at all? And more so just for the high school, not necessarily middle school, but was that ever put on the table?
The metal detectors were not in the study. It's not to say that that couldn't be something that was invested in. It's not something that we've had any substantive conversations about as a board.
And the last thing, and then I'll do it, someone else, but when I was in high school, we had a lot of needs, exactly like Swartz Creek. I came from Milford. And we did not have the funds, nor did we have the public support to pass any type of millage to fund what we needed in order to have the teachers in the district provide what the students needed to make their mission statement and their vision come to light, or be a little bit bolder. But we use portables. Have we discussed portables for wings that we can't afford to build? You can lease them, rent them, whatever. You're not in charge of having to worry about the maintenance. Whoever provides them can do that.
It's a great idea. It's a great solution in certain applications. We haven't considered that mainly because other than Morrish Elementary School and Elms Elementary School, who are close to capacity, all of our buildings have quite a bit of capacity left. So we don't have, in terms of space, like a desperate need. In the study, that was one of the things they looked at, was the efficiency of your space. How much of your space do you have that you use and need? Most of our elementary schools, other than the two that I mentioned, our middle school, our high school, they have space. Our high school is growing a little bit tight, but you'll see that particular renovation that was on the high school board included a connection of the new wing that comes off of the PAC and connects to the science wing, where you'd get a couple classrooms that would ease that burden. But, so that was in the study, for example. The study doesn't address portables, but it can be a solution in a absolute need that could be looked at. But we haven't seriously considered that yet, but it's not a bad idea. So, great, yep.
I'm from Philadelphia. Philadelphia public schools, I mean, they have, the metal detectors. I can't imagine, our taxes aren't exorbitant as you guys' taxes are. And, folks there sometimes don't even really pay their taxes. Where does those metal detectors come from? Does the federal government at some point get involved where we don't have to keep paying for things that's mandatory for our safety?
We hope so.
Where'd that come from?
I mean, we hope so. They're not currently doing that. And I'll just give you my, since you brought it up a couple times, I'll give you my personal perspective. Doesn't mean it's right. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. I'm just speaking for myself. I first started teaching in Chicago public schools on the south side of Chicago, near Cabrini Green, if you're familiar with that area. Very, very, very difficult inner city situation. They had metal detectors, and there is a certain stigma that comes with having metal detectors. And in the height of the fear that we're in right now, and everybody's tense, and everybody's nervous,
Oh, I'm scared.
absolutely.
I'm terrified.
It's normal to kind of think to those types of solutions. Many of the school shootings that have happened have had metal detectors. Metal detectors do not necessarily eliminate that particular threat. What's far more effective is to have a double entry where you have a human being who is scanning a person, watching a person, dial it in on the person, and then allows the person access to the building in an appropriate way. And so we have to balance, right? Security is our top priority. We've been talking about that a lot. But we also have to balance that with the needs and reasonable solutions for our kids. So it is a reality. And I will tell you that these types of conversations also happen, and we did get better. So I think it was good, and I think it's good that we're having these conversations. But years ago, I was a building administrator when the Boston bombing occurred. And every day we had a new bomb threat, and there was a new bomb threat, and then there was a new bomb threat, and everybody was on high alert, and it was a really, really big deal. And we learned from that, and we had protocols that were developed through that, some of which we've even been using now. So it's good that these things occur because we learn and we get better and we grow stronger through them, but it's also good to kind of put those things into perspective too and think about what are real good solutions when we're looking at spending the money that we're talking about. Good question. Yes?
What type of things, from an educator standpoint, can we tell our kids to help calm them down? I mean, we're adults, we can think this through. I've been telling myself I have probably a better chance of getting killed in a car accident on the way to work than my kids have coming to school and being shot in Swartz Creek, Michigan, but it still can happen, I know that. But I mean, my kids finally broke down last night, and, my 13-year-old is like, I haven't slept in 2 nights, and I didn't even know. And so, I tried to calm them down, but they couldn't even, I don't even know if they slept last night. So, and then this morning, they still didn't want to come to school, but, I'm like, you gotta go. Because if you don't face the fear, you're just gonna keep going in the hole. And so they went. But how else do we tackle that without showing, of course we wanna show them compassion. You're scared, we want them to talk, they're talking, but now we got them talking, what else do we tell them?
Well, I think the first thing you said was great, and that is the same thing that happened when we were hit on the World Trade Centers, right? Nobody left their house. It was like, I'm never going out of my house again. And that's no way to live your life. And so I think the fact that you were able to have that conversation with your child was fantastic. You need to put your arms around them and love them, and let them know that you're there for them and that they're going to be okay and that you'll help them through that time. Kids, the mental health issues that we see with children at younger ages, part of it's a result of family dynamics, part of it's a result of culture and society. Kids need love, and we try and provide that here. One of the things that I would also encourage them to do is to be aware. We take every one of these threats seriously, which is why it's so frustrating that we've been exhausting 100% of our resources over every second of every day. Here's a new one, and it's like whack-a-mole. I mean, literally, because we have to treat it seriously. I'm not gonna live with myself if we didn't take one of those seriously and God forbid something happened. So we take them seriously. But the reality is it's important for the kids to also be aware. And when they see, right, something that's like, this could be a potential threat, they need to bring that right away to an administrator, a trusted adult, could be a teacher. And if they bring it to you as a parent and there's nobody, it's 9 o'clock at night, call the police. Because we want to know about it right away. That's exactly what happened in this last incident. That we got involved and we solved the problem. Well, we addressed the problem.
Right.
But the reality is, the worst thing that can happen is a child who doesn't have that instruction, who sends something out on Snapchat or on Facebook, and then a parent goes on and misinformation flying all over the place, and it creates mass hysteria that's just not accurate.
Right.
And so for kids to learn that if you're getting your news and information off social media, probably not accurate. So work with the people, the trusted adults that you have, and let them know. Don't be afraid to speak up and let those things happen. And our administrators at every building have been talking to the kids about that over the past week. And then I think that's coupled with the assurance that we're not sitting and letting the grass grow under our feet. I mean, we're doing intensive trainings. We're thinking about how can we be safer? What are some other protocols? What else haven't we thought of? How can we make the buildings more secure? I mean, I talked about it tonight. How can we add security to our existing facilities? So we are in the same boat as every other school in the United States of America, but I don't care about them right now. I care about Swartz Creek, and we're going to do everything we can to protect our kids.
Are the individual buildings having conversations even in just the classrooms in a smaller setting?
Even if in the auditorium.
Because one of the questions, one of the things and he's very good at arguing, not arguing, but in a smaller setting, bringing back. One of the things he said was, when I said, they're catching this, you gotta keep your eyes open and stuff and record it. And I said, they have the cameras at the doors, and he's like, all he has to do is just blow it open. And I'm like, but that's, they're catching it, they would see him first. No, that's not gonna happen. And so, he always has an answer, but he's always got, he's always thinking.
Right.
And I think if he had like the educator in the classroom going, no, this is what we do. This is the stuff we are doing behind the scenes and not hearing it from his mom.
Right.
Sure. Yep.
Maybe those kind of conversations. He goes to the middle school where the high schooler was like a completely different story. She kind of understood a little bit more, but.
Yeah. And the last thing I would just say is, and I put this in my email, we will absolutely go bananas to prosecute any kid that makes a threat.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
I
So,
just read your whole email.
yeah, the reality is, we're not gonna tolerate it, we have zero tolerance for that, we're gonna prosecute, and they need to understand what's at stake, what that means. It's not worth the attention seeking that they might try and get for making that type of a threat.
Okay.
Yes,
Speaking to that, it's like, is there anything that we can do, like, in the school systems? I mean, even at work, we are given, social media, security awareness training that you have to, like, go through and sign off, and, I just think that maybe at this, with kids having access to technology a lot earlier these days, I think we need to really look at what kind of education we can provide at a younger age. Because to your point, somebody might put something out on social media and not realize the seriousness of it and really completely throw their future.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So I think, like, as a parent, it starts with us, but then what could we do in the school system to really enforce it at an earlier age, to start educating around the dangers of that?
that's good feedback. We've started doing that, earlier. Usually our 6th graders are gonna get quite an earful on what's appropriate to send out in a text message and what's appropriate to share. I mean, just over the last 5 years, the amount of kids that are sending pictures of themselves that aren't appropriate has been, and to try and help them understand, like, that doesn't go away. You have a digital footprint, and so we've been talking to kids about that and what to look for and what to be aware of, but, great,
Like any
great
kind of
point.
seminars
If you
or
click
training?
on the school website under OK to Say, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, there's links that the state of Michigan has that will give you talking points and training points for your kids at all age levels. Questions that you can have while you're having dinner or lunch or in the car, so they're stuck having to hear you and have that dialogue.
Oh, no, I don't have a problem having
But
that conversation
there's-
with my kids.
there's a
I'm just
ton of
saying that I think
this thing that's put together that they provided a link to.
Yeah,
And
but I
know
think
that
that parents, the reality is that parents are flying here, there, and everywhere, right? So their children are getting maybe less attention in some cases,
Mhm.
not maybe intentionally, but,
Yeah.
I think the reality is that, again, I see kids at a much younger age having technology, and I think that it's our jobs as parents, as teachers, to educate them at a much younger age at the dangers of that, from, from many aspects,
Sure.
because you just don't wanna see a good kid make a bad decision that's gonna cost them their future.
Yeah.
And then also just being like lured in by whatever's out there, so I think that, we just need to acknowledge the reality of that. And again, if you go to a workplace, there's automatic training sessions for that kind of stuff, but yet, and there's ramifications too, you can lose your job if you post a certain thing, so
Yeah. That's good.
I think we
feedback.
should teach them that
Okay.
sooner.
Thank you. Yeah.
A while ago, someone was talking about this stuff in the classrooms.
Sure.
We don't do that. I'm in ninth grade right now.
Mhm.
We don't talk about anything, even while the bomber gun threat was going on in the high school a couple days ago. The teachers did nothing. We asked our teachers what was going on, they just shrugged, they denied it all. We're not getting any information, all we're getting is stuff through social media. So that's kind of what we have to believe, because adults aren't talking to us about this.
Did you hear Mr. Kitchen's message? Did that come through on ITC?
No.
Okay. So Mr. Kitchen did a message to address this very issue that, I'm sorry that you didn't hear that, and I'm sorry that your teacher didn't do that. But that's something that's good for us to know. One of the things that you have to recognize too, and I'm not making an excuse for anyone, but these are very different times for some of our teachers as well. And so we're talking with them about how to have these conversations. So we are having conversations around the building, across the building, but, it would be the next level to have those conversations in classrooms. So I like that. Thank you. Yes?
Question with doors. I have 3 kids, 3 different schools. I can honestly, and most of the people know, when I'm there or whatever. But my husband has gone on several occasions, and they don't know who he is, and they literally just, boop, and he walks right in. There is no question, last Tuesday I had to come up and take care of a situation with my son, and I know what the policy is, I walked into the office, there was nobody in there, the lights were off, and I walked through this entire building, past, I can't tell you how many hall monitors, I had to go to his locker, I had to go to the media center, and then I had to go down to the office, but I expressed that, why did I just walk through this entire building and not one person questioned me? Not one. I didn't have a visitor pass on because there was nobody in the office, the lights were off. By that time, the bell had rang, and that's a little concerning to me that anyone could have walked in and hid somewhere. Can we have people at the doors that are maybe directing people as soon as the doors are unlocked? Someone needs to be in that office. Someone needs to be when they're buzzing people in. Who are you, what are you here for?
Yep. There needs to be that person standing out in the hallway, not even in the office.
Right.
Yeah. And the same thing at the high school, and we just had that conversation today, rerouting people that are in the hallways, those types of things, so. I agree. Yes?
Can we go back to the double entry?
Yeah.
Would we be needing to purchase new doors for all the buildings? My concern is gaining second step doors as well.
Yeah, there would be in Gaines, for example, a new installation of new doors there, because those doors would not be security rated like we would be talking about. So when we do this type of a double entry, all of the buildings would have upgraded security doors installed. So, yep. A couple more if you're here and then here.
Was there an actual security survey done? I know MJB, but was there a security survey done with tiers of what could be accomplished at the schools based on perceived needs?
Was there a specific security survey? No, there was not. NJB contracts out to different vendors, for example. So they'll say, okay, in other schools, these are some of the metrics that they're using. So what types of things can we do? Some of the things that we talked about, boots for the doors, digital locks, those types of things. What I can tell you is that we work with the Michigan State Police, our local police, and law enforcement, and we've also brought in national programs and trainers to come look at our facilities, run these drills, That's what Alice has been born out of, this new training that we're doing. So they are definitely looking at that. There has not been a comprehensive facility or security audit like that. I'm not sure that I know of one that exists. Maybe you do, but I know that we definitely have been analyzing all of those buildings and looking at the different parts and how they compare to other buildings. So, yes, sir.
When it comes to prioritizing, I would think that safety at this point would be high. And
Yes.
I would think that those double doors in all of the school systems would be almost immediately taken care of. Are you looking at that, or the board looking at that?
Yeah, we would probably agree, and if we could just snap that finger and make it happen, but it's
Well, I
millions of
understand
dollars.
funds, but I would think that would be right at the top
Oh,
of the
yeah,
list.
yeah. But what we've done is what we have is more secure than some districts, okay? It's not where we wanna be. We would like to say we're state-of-the-art in terms of all security measures, right? And that would include these double entries. I can tell you right now, we don't have the money to perform a reconstruction of the front entry of every building. We just don't. So that's not a reality as it stands right now, but we are, like I said earlier, we're chipping away and we're gonna try and do as much as we can right now. But I can certainly say that it's not as though they're unsecure. We're doing, some things. We can obviously be way better. I mean, we can always get better, and we wanna be the best in that area, so, good question. Yes, sir?
Can we as parents participate in the ALICE program?
Can you as parents participate in the ALICE program? I do believe so. There's, in terms of availability and seats and slots, I don't have any problem with a parent participating. I think that could be helpful. I don't know that we could say offer it to, because it costs money for each person that we train. I don't know what our facilities and capacity to train every single person. We're training all of our staff, that's for sure.
I do think that, if you don't mind, I do think that there was a post, right after, there was a post online, I believe,
Okay.
that the school was gonna undergo that. I believe there was a parent post that her and her daughter did an online ALICE training.
Yes.
For like $24.
Yes. Yep, you can do
I saw
that.
that too.
Yep. So there's definitely an online option, but in terms of being trained with us, I don't have, I think the more the merrier. But it's just a matter of, I can't speak specifically to the capacity, but great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yep.
What would the timeframe be for the double doors if there was a possible millage that wouldn't get passed until November, so that money wouldn't come in until like 2019?
All right, so you're asking me a hypothetical question, and I'm gonna try and answer it. So, if there was a potential millage that were to be passed in November, we would try and make, as this gentleman here just alluded to, those security things would go to the top of the list. So those would be the first things that we'd start working on. Feasibly, construction could start on a lot of these areas that are non-classroom based areas probably as early as the new year. So in 2019 would be when we would look to try and do a lot of this. But the scope of this project is multiple years. So not all of this is gonna happen in a summer, right? It's gonna be, but those security things would probably be at the top of the list to get done immediately. And those things would happen in 2019 towards the beginning of the year. Well, again, I think we need to have people who are visible in those entry areas, who are, as we just talked about, identifying, asking, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Escorting people to those places. Visitor passes in every building. Continued looking at the ALICE protocols and making sure that everybody's trained in that. Some of the things that we're gonna start looking at now, before we talk about any other kinds of additional funds, what can we do to purchase door boots for every door so that a teacher can easily slide one in and it cannot be opened? Those types of things. Anything we can do right now with the limited funds we have, we would be looking at doing those things in the short term, if that helps. Yes?
Are we underestimating the sense of urgency is heightened? Don't you think if we could strike while the iron is hot, people will give money?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but if the,
When you push things back in November, I mean, is that your comfort zone?
no, it's not a matter of comfort. So I'll give you very open answers here. The board is gonna have to wrestle with whether or not they're going to go to our community and ask for money, okay?
When?
They're gonna have to make that decision soon, okay? If they make that decision, if the earliest we could get on a ballot would be November of 2018, okay? So that would be the earliest, because the laws regarding these things, there has to be filings that occur. We would have filing deadlines that would have to be made by May, okay? So that's the process. So believe me, if it was just on security, I could say, we need this money now. I would go and ask the voters for money if it were my decision. It's not my decision. Ultimately, it's gonna be the board's, and I'm gonna be working with them. But if that's the decision they choose to go, the absolute earliest would be November of 18.
Will you be transparent about their decision on when?
100%, absolutely. Since I've been here, we've videotaped every board meeting, so you can go on and watch it with popcorn. Good stuff. Yep, absolutely. Yes, sir.
On the issue of Mary Crapo, is there a shutdown date? Has the building been offered for sale yet?
We've been looking for suitable suitors that would be interested in it. We've talked to the WODA group, we've talked to a company in Flint. There's one other that we're trying to make a connection to. Yes, we're exploring those possibilities. There has not been a ton of interest at this time. To put things into perspective, it's probably a $15 million renovation to get the building to something that somebody would be able to utilize in that capacity. I do think with the economy coming back and with some of the rumors coming out of Duran that there's an improved possibility of a sale. So we're looking at that all the time. The answer to your first question is we've been given a variance by the state and the fire department to operate until July 31st. So July 31 is our last day that we can be in that facility.
What's the asking price of it if you were to sell it? Or this is what we'll take to get out of it?
If it was the right person, we would probably lovingly and graciously bestow it to somebody, I'm guessing. So we've asked the family if they want it back, and they said, don't call us ever again about that.
I mean, I would love to see it because it's historic, I would love to see it stay within the community. But the reality is, it's a lot of money. And then we're thinking future of the district. My head is thinking, let's buy those 5 houses that are along Fairchild from the entrance to the high school south to the little parking lot, tear down Mary Crapo, build these people replacement houses, and then use that space to get a proper football, track, soccer field, lighting. I mean, I don't know.
Talking controversy now.
Well, I mean, it's gonna make the community better as a whole, and like the lady back there said, it's gonna make your property values go up. It's an investment that's gonna be long-term. If you do it right the first time, you don't have to do it again.
Yeah. I would tell you that our conversations, and I don't want to speak for any of you, you can speak up if you want. The conversations have been that our desire is to see the historicity of Mary Crapo preserved to the fullest extent possible. So if we can maintain the character of the building, at least on the exterior, and somebody could do something inside, that would be our first choice, and we're still trying to see if anybody would be interested in that, and we will still continue that. Even if we have to move out by July 31, we would still continue to search for that. But I don't know that anything's off the table from what you're saying, but we do want to make a commitment to keeping any of those historical buildings in place. It has a lot of nostalgic value to many of our constituents and citizens. So.
The only other thing I wanted to ask, now that we are paying a APR percentage on that 0% we were supposed to have for the PAC, what's the equivalent percentage of interest that we're paying on that now? Or the approximate if you don't have it?
Well, the sequester has not been officially levied yet. So we're not I don't have that information. We're just being told that's what is likely going to be coming out from Congress and from this administration. That's what we're being told. So right now, we're being told you have your $300 to $400 grand, but I wouldn't plan on spending much, if any of it, right now, because you're likely going to have to utilize that So that brings about another set of circumstances where we might try and refinance that bond, which allows that, you know, or that loan, I should say, refinance that, which would allow it to, you know, be more affordable for the district.
And I lied, I do have one more thing. So we're paying over $1 million for that, for our payment each year. When we take into consideration our operating expense versus whatever revenue or funds coming in, are we in the red or are we in the black on that building?
That's a difficult question to answer, because you're in the red in every single building in the district, because we're a nonprofit and we're operating as a school. So we're in the red if you're talking about, are we bringing in all sorts of revenue and acts to fill the thing up?
Well, how about forget what the payment is? To keep the lights on and the people that we're paying that are in that building.
We're really
That's-
close to breaking even on
Okay.
that. Yep, really close to breaking even on that. Yep.
I know at the old high school in Durand, when they remodeled that,
Mhm.
they did that beautifully, cause my aunt lives over in that building.
Yes, that was the WODA group that did that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and, I mean, we walked through there when she moved in, and the greatest thing about that building was that they kept, the nostalgia part of it.
Mhm,
They kept, she has the heavy doors,
Mhm.
the old school doors, so that would be really nice
Mhm.
if they're able to do that.
Yeah.
Because they did a wonderful job.
Yeah,
with
I
that
agree.
building.
I agree. I love what they did there. Great question. I think we got time for two more. Yep.
Okay, question on
Yeah.
first of all, are there security cameras in the high school? I don't know for a fact, so.
Absolutely.
Even in the classrooms?
Not in the classrooms.
Will they be putting them in the classrooms? Is that something that?
That's
is-
not in our current plan, but they are in all of the high traffic areas.
And
You run
I
into,
know that you told me that you were gonna be doing something.
yeah, I talked to you in advance of this meeting. You got the first-hand scoop on
Yes, I
that.
did.
So, yeah.
So is it coming soon?
Yes,
Okay, so
Yeah.
my daughter's gonna be here.
yeah. Those are gonna be installed in the next month or so.
And because I know there's two entrances in and out of the school. Okay. I know that most people come in through here, through my neck,
Mhm.
you know what I'm talking about. So, is there someone when the kids are coming in during the day, that's gonna be at both entrances? Because when they first come in the morning, they just walk right in. So, I mean, there's like
Yeah.
no, where, I don't know if they do it at the high school or not, but.
Yeah, in terms of where the kids come in for buses and where the kids come in up here, there's an administrative oversight there. So that's where they're gonna be stationed to be watching that.
Be like making sure that things look.
Yeah.
And, okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
In that study, somewhere in those costs were remediation of asbestos. Some of the buildings still have traces of asbestos in them.
Can you speak to that, Lisa? Do you know?
I think where we identified things like tile, it was to encapsulate it,
Okay.
was the plan.
Yep.
So there wasn't a specific asbestos number, but there was general money
Yeah.
for things that would remediate, maybe not an actual abatement.
Yes. So the place in the district where we know we have asbestos and lots of it is at Mary Crayville. In the facility study, they did a full analysis of what that would cost and what that would look like. So we're not placing a lot of emphasis on that because we know that we're trying to, as we've talked about, find another suitor for that. What she's saying is where there is asbestos, such as a small room that might have some tile, and you can encapsulate it, you can't disturb it. And so I think that was the decision in terms of trying to tear things out and do those types of things, in most cases. But yes, there is some money allotted for asbestos abatement. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just one more, someone else brought it up, for the high school, the academy doesn't show double doors. Was the academy not part of this study?
The academy was, that's, the academy is a little bit more of an intimate space. You have smaller numbers of people coming in. I'm not sure that it shows that on that particular thing, but again, there are gonna be minor adjustments to some of these things. So I think as a result of that, you would see some of those things being addressed, so. There is? Okay, yeah, so we might not, is it, showing on?
It is, there was a set of egress doors, so that we
Okay.
didn't end up with a dead-end corridor.
Okay,
It just split the
high school from the academy, but
Yeah.
those would not have any hardware on the outside.
Okay, gotcha.
They'd be egress only.
Yeah.
So you couldn't physically open them from the outside.
Okay, so, yep, good question. Anything else? Yeah?
Referring to the whack-a-mole statement,
Yep.
do you go back and track these students that start these types of rumors, and is there a discipline that takes place for those kids that are starting them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we were nailing down today. The people who started the mass hysteria.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And that's part of the conversation you can have with your kids to help them understand that, you know, I understand you might be scared or those types of things. That's a different conversation. But for the kid that might think it's funny or attention seeking to do that type of thing, help them understand the severity of that. So, yeah.
Get 'em?
I'm gonna reserve comment on that, but I can say that we do feel we have 2 people, yes. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's like a lot of fear, because a lot of kids are not showing up for school. Is there any talk about maybe bringing together like an assembly? Just to have like an open forum, bring in the local, you know, just to share like, okay, who has concerns, what are your fears? Kind of almost in a sense, allow them to ask questions, be educated. I mean, you can really cover a lot if we maybe look at it.
Yes.
Just to kind of break through the barriers at this moment.
Yeah, all of those things are conversations that we're having.
Okay.
But truthfully, I can't even put hours to it. It has been around the clock trying to determine that a threat is not credible, that we haven't had time to sit down and say, okay, how are we gonna do all these proactive things? Yeah, we are gonna do those, we wanna do those, but those conversations are happening so sporadically because we're responding and reacting. You know, I said earlier, we're educators, but we've been thrust into this role now, and protecting kids goes to the top of the list. It's like, we wanna work on this curricular piece. Well, the curricular piece is gonna sit there because we got safety, security things, right? That rises at the top. So there's a lot of time and energy and resources that get devoted to this. So absolutely, those are all things we're talking about, we wanna do, but we do have a leadership meeting planned on Thursday, and we're hoping to kind of just flesh some of those details out, so. Yes?
With the ITC, I just wanted to say something. I know some of the kids don't hear, from what I understand.
Okay.
The classrooms don't quiet down
Mm-hmm.
and listen. So I think that's why the one student.
Yeah,
said
that's good feedback.
They don't hear it.
Yeah.
They don't get to hear it.
Those are things we can address. Her comments are good things for us to know as well. Yep.
A lot of the teachers that I have at the high school, they don't know how to control their kids. They don't know how to treat a kid when they're acting up. They usually just tell them, hey, quiet down, which is never enough, especially for the really bad ones. Like, they need discipline, right?
Start at home. Listen to it start at home.
Mom, I'm a good kid, and you haven't disciplined me since I was 4.
It's good.
You could put a video together, just a short one, and provide a link, since all these kids are obsessed at staring at their phones. Let the kids watch it. Something just in regards to, calming their fears, or telling them, here's your resources if you wanna talk to somebody. Because if you don't have time to do an assembly because we're here now instead of in the classroom, I get it, but there are kids who probably would take that 15 minutes and watch whatever you
Yeah.
have to say, or even if it was the principal of the school, or one of
Yeah.
the popular teachers or whatever.
Well, the good news is we already have that recording. We just need to maybe push it out in a different format, so that's good.
I just want to give kudos to the teachers who are, because I know these teachers are putting up with a lot of stuff they didn't have to put up with.
Yeah.
As far as I know, when I was growing up. And for the ones that are really trying hard and that might have to protect our children, they shouldn't have to protect our children. That's not their duty. They're there to teach our children. And I just want you to know that there's a lot of really good ones out there, and a lot of really, I know, like, for example, Mrs. T, she's phenomenal. And so, I don't think any of us are here, at least me, to go against any of them.
Sure.
I just want my baby safe.
Absolutely.
I
Totally
want
get it.
everybody's kids safe. I want you guys safe. I mean, heck, I'm an employee, I want to be safe.
Yeah, amen.
So it's like,
it's great, and I think as a community, we can have these conversations and we're coming together. Hopefully the communication gaps can be eliminated and we can continue to have these conversations. And I'm appreciative that so many of you did come out tonight. I know it turned into a little bit of a different conversation, but I hope you understand why we did the study and what we're trying to accomplish here. And to your question earlier, we will be very transparent about the board's decisions and what they're going to do regarding that. So, okay.
Thank you for your transparency.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
I want to thank Ben and the administrators for being here tonight too. They're taking their evenings to share the plans. And it seems like there's a lot of passion in the audience, and I want to echo Ben's comments about you coming out tonight. This shows the caring, compassionate community that I know Swartz Creek is. And I really do appreciate your ideas and your comments. Please know that there will be a lot of conversations about whether a bond is proposed. So I'm going to put all of you on the spot, assuming that you are all registered voters of Swartz Creek. Who would be willing to support a bond? So you have your committee now. And I thank you for that, because I know you've heard it. I know you've heard about the challenges of the finances, the keeping our safety of our kids a priority. So as you leave tonight, I hope that you will share within the community your passion and what you've heard tonight. And then as we share information, spread it out there in the community. It's much better than rumors. And make that a fact, that we really need to improve our schools and the safety of our children. And please, please, please share that with your friends and family. It would make a huge difference. So with that, I am going to open up the floor, even though we've had an opportunity for folks to comment. If you do want to make a comment to the board, please stand and state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less if there's anyone else that hasn't had a chance to comment. Well, thank you again. I appreciate that. Now I would entertain comments and questions from our board. Anybody? No? I would be remiss if I did not introduce to everybody our newest board member, Tony Jones. Tony is a member of our community. He has a daughter in the middle school, and we are so happy to have him join us.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. I'm happy to be a part of the board, here to help. I understand the passion that I've heard tonight and the concerns with safety and security. It's the daughter in the middle school is important to me as well. So I thank you for coming out and listening and hearing and commenting with us. And I'm excited to get aboard and start to help drive improvements in the district. So thank you.
So with that, we will adjourn. Thank you again.